Hey, what is up guys? Really coming at you with another epic Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile, and today's deck profile is a profile I've been wanting to do for a very long time. I've featured this archetype quite a bit on the channel, and it is currently the most viewed archetype analysis I've done on the channel. This deck would basically be impossible to build without the release of the new OCG card called Possessed Awakening, so that obviously tells you that we're doing a Charmer deck profile today. We also need to remember that Possessed Awakening is currently not a TCG card. It is an OCG exclusive card, but the deck is practically unplayable without it. So again, bearing that in mind, this deck is not a TCG buildable deck, but hopefully the card will be imported very soon, maybe as a common import, which they love doing. But considering it's being released in like I think an anniversary or a special set, the chances of it coming are a lot less likely. But anyway, you do need to run it in the deck, and we're going to go through my Familiar Possessed Charmer deck profile today. Hopefully, guys, you like it. It is still a work in progress, so as you see it, if you think of any suggestions that could help it out, please let me know in the comments below. And remember, this deck is a casual themed deck, like a lot of the profiles are doing. It's not something you want to take to your regionals. You could take it to meme at your locals if you really want to, but remembering it is designed for more casual play against more casual decks. So now that that's out of the way, guys, let's jump into the profile. First off, with our monsters, we played 2 copies of Familiar Possessed Win, who just happens to be my favorite Charmer, 2 copies of Familiar Possessed Area, 2 copies of Familiar Possessed Hitter, who you can play at 3 if you want to, because you do have the link. I think she's fine at 2. You don't really go into the link that much. 2 copies of Orsia, 2 copies of Dark, and 1 copy of Lena. So these are basically your main engine of the deck. They are your level 4 beat sticks, and they get pretty big. They all have 1850 attack, 1500 defense, level 4s. They are played in this deck as vanillas. We do not play any of the normal Charmers to summon them out because it gets really cloggy. And whilst this support does kind of, help out with both forms of both the Familiar Possessed and the normal versions of the Charmers, you basically just want to focus on the Familiar Possessed, because otherwise it's just really reliant on what your opponent has. Next up, guys, 3 copies of Fairy Tale Luna. So Fairy Tale Luna is insane in this deck. She has 1850 attack as a spellcaster, which basically means she triggers off Familiar Possessed Awakening as well. She's also able to search any spellcaster with 1850 attack points when she is normal summoned. Now, after doing some reading, I do believe that's not once per turn, so if you can turbo out a bunch of these on the field, you can do the search, and she also has the nice bounce effect, which can really mess around with your opponent. So very, very important to run that 3 copies in the deck. Because we're running 3 copies of her, we do have at least 3 extra light attribute monsters, so that's why we play Lena at 1. Theoretically, you could take Lena out of the deck completely, but I still want to play her at 1 copy. And finally, we have 2 copies of Effect Veiler, because it is a spellcaster, hand trap, and we do basically play Solidarity in this deck, because it helps get our Charmers to really, really big attack points. If you didn't want to play Veiler in the deck, you can always play Droll, and if you really want to put money into this, you can play Impermanence as well. Basically, every monster in your deck needs to be a spellcaster, unless you really don't want to play Solidarity. That's fine. I like playing it because it gives me that massive attack point boost. And the last monster we play in the deck is 1 copy of Blizzard Princess. I actually love Blizzard Princess. I think she's very underrated for like generic spellcaster beatdown decks. She can be tribute summoned by attributing 1 spellcaster as opposed to 2 monsters. She's got 2800 beat stick, which is pretty powerful. She's a water attribute, so very different to the not light. So that's good. We have extra attributes in our deck as well. And then, of course, when she is summoned, during this turn, your opponent cannot activate spell or traps for the rest of the turn. So, good way to lock down the opponent and take out a bunch of their monsters, have a big beat stick as well. And, of course, she does get power from Possessed Awakening and Solidarity, because she is a spellcaster. So, that's really cool. Moving on to the spells, guys. Of course, we have 3 copies of Possessed Awakening. Possessed Awakening is a continuous spell that all monsters you control gain 300 attack for each different attribute among monsters you control. So basically, if you can get all 6 Charmers out on the field, you're going to get an extra 1800 attack points for all your monsters, which is pretty big. Now, it is possible to get all 6 attributes out because there is a Charmer link for Heater. Hopefully, they will make links for the rest of the Charmers, or at least the main 4 in the future. And one thing also I love about Possessed Awakening is how it kind of its artwork mirrors the artwork of Unpossessed, which was the pets, and then this is just the 4 base Charmers. Its second effect is Charmer and Familiar Possessed monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects, which makes cards like Dark Hole, Torrential Tribute, really, really good in this deck. I know that kind of counteracts the Destroy by Card effect ability of Unpossessed, where you do get to float, but the ability to be protected from card destruction from effects is really handy for this deck, because at the end of the day, you are playing vanilla beat sticks, so very, very powerful. And its last and most important effect for this deck, other than the attack point boost, is that whenever a spellcaster type monster with exactly 1850 attack is normal summoned or special summoned to your field, draw one card. This is a high once per turn, but it's really cool. I do believe you can use this effect in your opponent's turn, and there are ways to summon Charmers in your opponent's turn. And what's really good about this is it also works off summoning Luna. So if you summon Luna, Luna will also let you search your card, and then you get to draw a card. So you can kind of chain lock, so they can't like strike or hit your Luna if you chain link one Luna, chain link two Possessed Awakening. So lots of cool stuff. This card is insane. Hopefully we get a Possessed Searcher soon. I'd love that for future support, but as the way they support Charmers, it's very, very random. So hopefully in the future they get some more support, but it's unlikely. Next up, we have 3 copies of Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Very important in this deck. Like all generic Spellcaster rank 4 beatdown decks, or a lot of generic Spellcaster decks in general, Secret Village is just insane. It basically stops your opponent from activating spells so long as you control a spellcaster and they don't. The downside is if you don't have a spellcaster, you can't activate spells. But because your deck is full of level 4 1850 attack point spellcasters, it's not too hard to get a spellcaster out on the field, especially that if they're destroyed and you've got Unpossessed out, you can just float straight away into another one. Being able to lock down your opponent's spell cards is very important, as it shuts down all of their decks, and it's one of the reasons why you want to go first with this deck and get it out as quickly as possible. Because of that, we run 2 copies of Terraforming. You can run Metaverse if you want to find space for it. I'm thinking of teching it in, definitely side it in this deck, because if they hit your first Secret Village, you definitely want to get a second one ready to go as quickly as possible. Similarly, of course, whilst negating spell cards is really good as well, you also want to negate traps. So Magician's Left Hand is another card I love that's very, very underrated. So it negates the effect of the first trap card your opponent activates each turn so long as you control a spellcaster. Again, not very hard to get a spellcaster out on the field, and being able to negate a trap means you can negate stuff like Evenly Matched, Impermanence, and stuff like that, because this card is already on the field. So I do believe, because of timing and the way it's worded, it would activate first. So it's another great way to protect your Charmers, because a lot of people don't actually play traps. Casually, more so you go up against Solemn Strikes and stuff, and having that set up means they can't like strike your Luna, and it's probably going to be the only thing they're going to strike, because you're normal summoning 90% of the time in this deck. And that's one of the things I love about how this deck works. Next up, guys, 2 copies of Solidarity. This is completely optional. I like running it because we need big attack point monsters. So if you have one printed type of monster in your graveyard, all monsters on your field of the same type gain 800 attack. So basically, if you have all spellcasters in your grave, all your spellcasters gain 800, which is why we're playing pure spellcasters. And having this in combination with Possessed Awakening, Awakening Possessed, and Unpossessed gives your Charmers a crazy amount of attack points and makes it very difficult for your opponent to beat over them, which is what you want. Next up, guys, 2 copies of Arrival Rivals. This card is so troll in this deck. Again, this is another really underrated card. During the battle phase, immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon an extra monster. It's a quick play spell. So you can chuck out a Charmer in your opponent's turn, and then you can draw a card off your Possessed Awakening, or you can jump another Charmer on the field in your own battle phase. And if you haven't already summoned one that turn, which you probably already have, but if you haven't, you can draw, and it also increases their attack by playing a different attribute. It's also a really good way to, insinuate the beatdown cases in this deck. I only played it 2 copies because I really want to play a copy of Double Summon as well. Again, for similar reasons. Play as many Charmers as you can at once to get them huge once you have your protection up, and your opponent basically won't be able to beat over them. The only downside is this deck doesn't have any protection from monster effects, so maybe you want to side in some strikes and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's a beatdown deck, and we do have some distractions. So in terms of Magical Dimension, again, I love this card. So you tribute a spell face-up, you can activate when you have a face-up spellcaster type monster. Again, not hard. You tribute a monster in your side field, and you special summon a spellcaster type monster from your hand. Then you can destroy a monster on the field. Now, I do not believe this targets, so it's non-targeting destruction. You can summon another Charmer out. You can do it in your opponent's turn to get to draw a card off your continuous spell. You destroy, get more Charmers out on the field. Really, really cool. Amazing card. And it also gets past tributing, so if you want to special summon out your Blizzard Princess, you can with that effect. Next up, guys, 3 copies of Pot of Duality, because this deck does not special summon very, very often, very rarely. So Duality is amazing in this deck. And our last spell card, guys, is Dark Hole, because our monsters are protected from destruction from card effects. Our opponent's monsters theoretically aren't. So, pretty cool. You can either run other destruction cards if you want, like TT, Torrential Tribute. You can run Cosmic Cyclones and stuff if you have the space for it, but at the end of the day, it's just a beatdown deck, and against the decks I play against, this build works perfectly fine. And finally, moving on to our traps, only 3 copies of Unpossessed, the only trap card we play. The most important, probably the only trap card you will want to play, except maybe if you want to start in Strikes, or you want to run Impermanence, depending on value, how much you want to spend on it. And of course, you can run Magician's Circle, which is another great way to cheat spell cards out on the field. But again, you've got to make room for it all. And trying to cut this down to exactly 40, some things have to get cut. So Unpossessed is one of their first real support cards. So Charmer monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. That's only really relevant for our Link monster. If a familiar possessed monster, attacks an opponent's monster, it gains 800. So they go from an 1850 beat stick to a 2650 beat stick. Plus you add Solidarity on top of that. Plus you add a Possessed Awakening on top of that as well. They're getting pretty big for level 4 monsters. If a monster you control will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon a monster with one spellcast type monster with 1500 defense from your deck, whose attribute is different from at least one of the destroyed monster's original attributes on the field in attack position or face down defense. So this effect is a hard once per turn, but basically it gives your familiar possessed monsters more attack. If they die, you float into another one. So very, very powerful. Run it at 3 copies because you need to see it as quickly as possible. And finally, moving on to the 1 card extra deck we currently have, because again, it's not too focused on the extra deck. So if you really wanted to, instead of the dualities, and again, if you want to spend money on it, you could run Pot of Extravagance and then banish, play a bunch of random cards in your extra deck, and then run 3 copies of Heater, and then, easily draw cards. But again, it's all up to how much money you spend on the deck. So we have Heater, the Fire Charmer Ablaze. So she is a Link 2, recruiting 2 monsters. One must be a fire, so you make her with Heater and 1 other monster. It doesn't really matter. She is always treated as a familiar possessed card, so she's treated as a charmer and a familiar possessed, so she can't be destroyed by battle, and also she gains 800 attack if she attacks, which is really good. And of course it works with Possessed Awakening as well, because you're special summoning her when you link summon, so you do get to draw off that as well. So basically just use her as a beat stick. If you really want to get the 6 attributes out, you can chuck her in the extra monster zone and then have the other 5 in the main zone. She does have an effect that works really well for generic fires if you want to. So if she Link Summon card is destroyed by battle or by opponent's card effect while in your monster zone, you can add 1 fire monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. And then her other effect is you can target the fire monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your zone this card points to. So you can, it's a nice little way to talk about how, nice little reference to the old Charmer effects where they steal your opponent's monsters. When they're flipped, now they can take them from your opponent's graveyard, which I think is pretty cool. But at the end of the day, we just run her so we can have the 6 attributes out on the field. But anyway, guys, that's it for the deck profile. Hope you guys enjoy it. Like I said, if you have any suggestions for it in terms of remembering that this is more of a casual deck, please let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, remember to like and subscribe. If you want to see some more awesome Charmer stuff, I do have my archetype analysis, and I do have my more extended thoughts on Possessed Awakening and Heater, the Heater link. So if you want to check those out, they are up here on the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you for my next video.